Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Hey, really glad you're with us for the Friday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. Jim joins us from Chicago before, thankfully, finding a flight home today. Hopefully it's easier to get home from Chicago than it was from Milwaukee the day that CrowdStrike thing happened. Jim,
Yes.
not to jinx you. Anyway, the Democratic National Convention is in the books. And I guess in some ways, Jim, conservatives should be flattered at how much the Democrats tried to co-opt Republican and conservative themes throughout the week. Unlike 8 years ago at the Hillary Convention in Philadelphia, they remembered to bring their American flags. So that was nice. They even dressed in red, white, and blue. Kamala's talking tough on national security, which we'll get to in a minute. But kind of a theme here about what Kamala wants the American people to believe about her and what we know the Kamala Harris record to actually be. So this first one, I think, Jim, is attributable to the fact that the Obama people, Pluff and others, are pretty much running her campaign now. And that's why I think we're seeing her dodge specifics, stay with the soaring rhetoric, very Obama-esque from 2008, just kind of project whatever you want a president to be on this person who's this historic figure, right? So here's Kamala Harris after a pretty extensive personal story to kick off the speech. Here's what she said she'd be as president.
This election has a precious, fleeting opportunity to move past the bitterness, cynicism, and divisive battles of the past, a chance to chart a new way forward. Not as members of any one party or faction, but as Americans. And let me say, I know there are people of various political views watching tonight, and I want you to know, I promise to be a president for all Americans. You can always trust me to put country above party and self, to hold sacred America's fundamental principles, from the rule of law to free and fair elections to the peaceful transfer of power. I will be a president who unites us around our highest aspirations, a president who leads and listens, who is realistic, practical, and has common sense, and always fights for the American people.
So, Jim, if you're not familiar with Kamala Harris and you're looking for a reason to vote for her, that could be effective. But we've got 8 years just in Washington of proof of Kamala Harris that she's nothing like that.
I was going to say, if you had never heard of the name Kamala Harris and you knew nothing about her, which, by the way, may be a bigger chunk of the American people than we think, or people
Right.
who know next to nothing about her, and they listen to that speech, you'd love her. This is all great. This is all fantastic. Oh, finally, somebody's going to not be so partisan. Somebody's going to be reaching out to the other side and trying to unite people and not trying to divide people, blah, blah, blah. Look, this was also the message from Joe Biden 4 years ago. This was also the message shortly after he won the election. Donald Trump went out and said, I'm going to be a president for all the people, not just the ones who voted for me. And before that, the president who spoke a couple nights ago, Barack Obama, began his career, launched into the stratosphere by a speech at a Democratic convention in which he insisted, there are no red states or blue states. There are only red, white, and blue states. And none of them have ever done that. And I think that this is this kind of hand-waving wish casting that the divisions that I think are just inherent to a two-party system will fade away if we have some sort of now munificent son queen who will step down into the presidency we will put all of these divisions behind. What is your job title again? What do you do for a living? Why are you collecting a paycheck? Oh, you're the vice president, right? Oh, and does the vice president run the administration? No. And one of the subtle themes of this convention from a whole bunch of these different speakers is there's an implication that, we could say, they're acting like she was an absolute bystander for the last, 3.5 years and she had no say in Biden policies. Or She was an absolute bystander for the last 3 years and had next to no say in Biden administration policies because she was given the migration assignment. Didn't do very much with that. And then, like, after a year or two, they shuffled her off to talk about voting rights and abortion. And that was the two policy areas she was stuck with. And intermittently, she'd go to the Munich Security Conference. But, like, it's not like we saw Kamala Harris out there every single day alongside Joe Biden being the messenger and setting the agenda for what the administration was going to do. So ironically, like, maybe she has a little bit more truth to that. And like this, it'd be nice if she could have come out and said, hey, America, what you saw for the last 3.5 years, that's not me. At one point she said, and we're kind of alluding to our discussion of foreign policy later, that she'll ensure that America always has the most lethal fighting force in the world. Well, the Biden administration has proposed defense cuts a bunch of times. Bunch of programs, bunch of cases where they say they're doing an increase, but you may have noticed this little thing called inflation. Oh, by the way, word did not appear in her remarks last night. A little vague, fleeting reference to rising costs. We're going to make things more affordable. No explanation of how, of course. Just we're going to do it. And with inflation, if you keep the budget flat or only a small increase, if you get a 2% increase in your budget, but inflation is 9%, you can't buy as much stuff. That's just the way it is. The U.S. military has got to buy a whole bunch of fuel. Fuel prices go up. They got to pay more too. So all these cases in which the Biden administration was not making sure that we have the most lethal fighting force in the world kind of cut corners here and there. Now, maybe she was opposed to it. There's no record of it. There's no indication of it. No leaks, but conceivably that. But this as I to summarize, this was an excellent speech for a challenger running against the record of Joe Biden for the last 3.5 years.
Exactly. So she starts off the speech by extolling Joe Biden. You're going to go down in history as this consequential president. You're so
or you're
great.
Going to go down.
And then she pivots to, we've got to get out of this dark, divisive, dystopian era. Pick one. Pick one.
Somebody has pointed out that with the exception of one or two speeches, there's been much less democracy is on the ballot, kind of rhetoric. This idea that if we elect Trump, we're never going to have another free and fair election again. And that was a bit like the centerpiece of the Joe Biden messaging. And I think there's this acknowledgement it wasn't working. People weren't buying it. People are much more worried about cost of living, cost of gas, cost of groceries, insecure border, et cetera. They just didn't believe it that if Trump gets elected, he was going to establish himself dictator and never have an election again.
Yeah, well, they couldn't sell Joe Biden, so they had to scare you against Trump. And now they think they can sell you a completely reworked version of Kamala Harris compared to the one that people were urging to drop off the Biden ticket just a number of months ago because she was such a disaster as vice president. So amazing how the narrative changes in just a very short period of time. All right, Jim, on to our second martini now. And again, it's Kamala DNC version, Kamala the nominee versus Kamala that we've seen for the last 8 years just in Washington. And we knew she was pretty radical even as a California state official before that. So talking about the economy, you mentioned she didn't even mention inflation, but she gave this rousing example of how she was going to be the champion of opportunity to succeed in America. It's like she, took it right from the opening paragraphs of the Declaration of Independence. Here's what that sounded like.
That's why we will create what I call an opportunity economy, where everyone has the chance to compete and a chance to succeed. You live in a rural area, small town, or big city. And as president, I will bring together labor and workers and small business owners and entrepreneurs and American companies to create jobs, to grow our economy, and to lower the cost of everyday needs like health care and housing and groceries.
Wow, that seems like a pretty good idea with absolutely no specifics whatsoever. We talked just a couple days ago about the massive tax increases that she's proposing for corporations, for capital gains, for unrealized capital gains and beyond. But what about Kamala when she's not a month and a half away from election? Here's a couple of examples of what she thinks America should look like economically.
It has to be about a goal of saying everybody should end up in the same place. And since we didn't start in the same place, some folks might need more. Equitable distribution. So there's a big difference between equality and equity. Equality suggests often everybody should get the same thing. Well, that often assumes everybody started out in the same place, as opposed to equity, which is everyone should end up in the same place. And if you then understand not everybody started out in the same place, you understand some people need more. So we all end up in the same place.
Well, that's communism. And not only does she not understand equity, she doesn't understand equality either, apparently. So, Jim, it's pretty hard to reconcile those two spots.
Just to kind of, well, I'll get philosophical, then I'll get into the specifics of the speech in a second. So it says, in our founding documents, all men are created equal. And what it really means, we should be all seen as equal in the eyes of the law. We're not actually created equal. I was just in the United Center. Michael Jordan dunks a basketball better than anybody else on earth, including you, LeBron James. But things like when they've created with the Soviet Union and these other communist societies tried to create societies where everyone is equal. Go figure. There were some people who were exceptional athletes, and even if they tried to keep the salaries the same, fame and status and opportunities change if you are an exceptionally talented athlete. If you're an exceptionally talented model, right? If you're an exceptionally talented actor, there are certain things I know. And also that if you have an inherently entrepreneurial spirit, a communist will try to suppress that. But in the end, or these socialist systems try to say, no, we don't want people rising above others. I hate to tell you, I mean, look at the natural, it's just kind of natural. But the thing is, the difference between some people are more talented than others, and therefore we're always going to have inequality. Therefore, social Darwinism is okay. No. What we really want is a society where everyone has the opportunity to maximize the gifts they have. And I'm a very big believer, God does not waste material. Everybody in this country, everybody in this world is really good at something. It's just a question of what does it take to find that? And what can you do? And yeah, maybe it's not going to make you a millionaire or a billionaire. There's something in this world that you excel at. Maybe you're a wonderful therapist. There are janitors out there. Maybe there's a person who's just a phenomenal janitor who can handle any problem coming down the pike, kid pukes, whatever it is, they take care of it. Great teachers, they're great parents. Everybody's good at something. So the question is, how in life can you find that? And how can you make your life better and life better for the people around you and life better for the people you care about by maximizing your use of those talents? And that's why my 6 CD set about Tony Robbins. But anyway, that's my, right? So the thing is that you're never going to have a society where everybody finishes the same and where everybody, and she's like, we didn't all start in the same place. Okay, that's true. What you want to do is give everybody the best opportunities to make the most of what they've got. That is the best option you're going to find. The moment you say, no, we got to take some from these people, got to take more to that people, and all that stuff. First of all, I don't trust anybody's judgment in doing that, in deciding who's the most deserving and who's good and who's bad and who's got too much and who's got too little. Because you notice they always seem to exempt themselves, right? There's never, Bernie Sanders and his 3 homes, and Michelle Obama talked about how, her parents are always suspicious of anybody who took more than they needed. And then she was followed by Oprah. So some of us can sense a little, contradiction there. The Netflix deal. Did you really need that, Michelle Obama? Did you really need that, Mr. President? But anyway, so that's where they are. In that comment about she's going to lower prices, I mentioned she didn't use the word inflation, but she did say we're going to lower prices for healthcare, housing, and groceries. No sense of how, right? Howard Dean, in his short-lived presidential campaign back in 2004, used to do this all the time. He would go out there and he'd say, we're going to, work with our allies. We're going to end the Iraq war. And people say, okay, but how? Oh, we're going to work with our allies. Okay, how? There was just this, he kept mistaking goals for a plan. And when you said, how are you going to do this? He would keep reiterating the goals. And it became very clear. He didn't really have a plan. He just kind of knew, honestly, not that different from the way Biden did. By sheer force of personality, I'm going to walk into the Oval Office and all of a sudden everybody's going to like me so much. This is going to work. And everybody's just going to come around because I'm such a charming and magnetic and irresistible personality. It's not the way these problems work. People do not actually, there's a small effect on that. Some leaders are better than others, but you don't just magically walk in and solutions just don't magically appear. The other thing is, I mentioned in today's Morning Jolt, Obama was masterful at taking a very left-wing agenda and making it sound common sense and normal and just the most utterly unremarkable thing in the world. J.D. Vance, I also would say, is up in that category in which he, I don't agree with a lot of his isolationism, protectionism, nationalism, populism. You look at his convention speech, which I thought was great. I disagreed with it, but I thought it was great because he made it sound like ordinary common sense. Kamala Harris can't quite get there. At this point, there's like this bigger gap there. And I think one of my favorite examples of it was when she said, I will be a president who unites us around our highest aspiration. It's a president who leads and listens, who is realistic, practical, and has common sense. And that's why I want the federal government to set the prices for food. That last line was not there, but that's the one policy proposal we have from her so far. And I'm going to be practical, I'm going to be common sense, and I'm going to have more direct government intervention into the economy in something everybody needs to buy, which is food, which has never been done before. And every other country that's tried it has ended up in this disaster because you take away the incentive for the producers. But it's going to be common sense. It's going to be pragmatic. Like that's a really glaring contradiction that I hope Trump, like if Trump can't hit that, then get out of the game, man. That's a real easy softball right over the plate.
Exactly. And there's a couple areas where she couldn't help herself on the radical policies. Abortion's one of them, although she, couched it in a way that it's women are dying if you don't support my position and that kind of thing. But it was the climate stuff. People have been talking about Republicans wanting more pollution all week, and I'm like, what are they talking about? And it's basically, as she said, getting rid of the factors that influence the climate crisis, which means getting rid of fossil fuels. And so that, I think, is where she is going with that. So that is a radical position. But then on other things, like the immigration situation, she's out there saying, we finally had a way to solve this. If this Senate bill was the linchpin the whole time to solving this crisis, which you didn't do anything about for 3 years total. And then as soon as the Senate thing didn't happen, all of a sudden, there are executive orders I can sign that would have helped a long time ago, but I'm going to put them in now to try and help us come November. And so it's just a complete reworking of history here.
You can give Trump and Republicans grief for not coming back with another counteroffer. You and I talked about in this podcast, there was nothing for border funding in there. The sheer number of people who are allowed to cross the border, it was like, was it 5,000 a day or something? And we're really trying to get it to zero. Like how low can we get that number? If Work you can't permits, get it, there was all kinds of, now I would argue that Republicans should have come back and said, we're going to take this and we want border funding and we want these numbers lower, and then just see what the Democrats do. See how desperate Biden was for a deal. Just one other kind of aspect of that, she posed as this tough border hawk, but also an earned path to citizenship for everyone who's in the country illegally. That's again, that's amnesty. That's saying you get to stay in the country, you get to become a citizen, even though you can enter here illegally. And I talk a bit about this in the Jolt, where so she spends her life, most of her career before the Senate as a prosecutor, and then in 2019 and 2020, the Democratic Party hates cops, hates the justice system, hates the entire thing. So she was in this, I was a progressive prosecutor. Look at all the people I didn't put in jail, right? This kind of this, that you could tell this, I've spent my whole life trying to be a certain kind of person. And now my party hates that. Right? Now she's much happier with the prosecutor versus a felon. And last night she says, as someone who has spent after decades in law enforcement, I know the importance of safety and security. Oh, really? I did not know. Wait, why didn't you mention this 4 years ago that you spent decades in? Remember, Kamala was a cop during the primary, and it was this meme going around. Remember Tulsi Gabbard gutting her as a fish? Now Kamala Harris is proud of her record as a prosecutor. And I'd say good for her. I think if you're going to be a prosecutor, be a good one. Throw people in jail. That is what the job entails. And probably the very best moment of the entire speech was her describing, I guess it was in her teen years, describing a friend saying she was being sexually abused, letting that friend live with her and her family, and basically saying, that's when I knew I wanted to be a prosecutor. I wanted to protect people. That's that's a beautiful story. That's a recognition that, for all the demonization of prosecutors and all the demonization of law enforcement, they are there to protect us. And are there bad apples? No doubt about it. But a lot of these people do this because they want to make the world a better place and because they want to protect people. They have this inherent desire of standing up against bullies. That's great. If she leaned into that the whole time. The problem is that she politically developed at a time when Democrats believed that law enforcement was inherently corrupt. It was inherently, and abolish, they were literally saying abolish the police and abolish ICE. And Harris never fully embraced that, although she did say we had to demolish ICE and start over again, that's not quite just, abolish ICE, but it's like abolish ICE, then create something else. And the other thing which kind of stuck in my mind was, they kept saying, oh, abolish the police is a metaphor. These people just want reform. And there was this beautiful op-ed written in the New York Times by an activist who wrote, yes, we literally want to abolish the police, which was kind of this, no, this is not, a metaphor. That has been purged from the Democratic Party. No one's talking about this. AOC was on her best behavior. And now Kamala Harris can go back to being proud of being a prosecutor again.
Yeah. Do law and order people usually put out tweets asking people to donate to bail funds for rioters who are attacking cops?
Yes, yeah.
So she's basically a, standard politician of being wherever she thinks she needs to be at a particular time. But we got a perfect metaphor for this whole convention and this speech last night, Jim. It's what they say is going to happen and what would really happen. Yesterday, we got all these tweets about, if you thought Oprah was a great surprise, you won't believe what happens tonight. So everybody's thinking, Beyonce, because that's the song that Kamala Harris uses. Maybe it's Taylor Swift. Could be even George W. Bush or somebody like that. In the end, it was nobody. And when they asked the DNC about it, CNN's Jeff Zeleny reported last night that, the special guest was Kamala Harris. So again, big promises.
Shut
And here's what you're really going to get.
This is what Jeff Zeleny should be booing. The reporters should be, because first of all, there was everybody I talked to last night was like, oh, did you hear? Do you think it's going to be Beyonce? I heard she's at the airport. I heard, and there was a lot of people thinking Taylor. You're right, George W. Bush. And I'm sure George W. Bush vehemently opposes Donald Trump and can't stand him. I don't think I could see Bush ever going and speaking at a Democratic convention. I almost wish it had happened just to see what the reception would be. Because a lot of those people were calling him Chimpy McBush Hitler, and hated his guts, thought he was the worst, but selected, not elect. It would have been if these people, we've already seen Democrats applauding Liz Cheney. Actually, Bush Cheney going out, it would be kind of interesting just to see the cognitive dissonance or just see whether heads exploded. But what I was really hoping for, Greg, after hearing those three, and also Dolly Parton, which I think would have been Dolly Parton's a very nonpartisan figure, beloved by everybody, so I don't think she was going to do it. But could you imagine what the reaction would be, Greg, if right before Kamala Harris, Beyonce and Taylor Swift and Dolly Parton and George W. Bush formed a supergroup and came out on stage and performed as a quartet? Would never happen, but yeah, that was the rumor I wanted to start. No matter who came out, there was going to be a disappointment or something. Yeah, I think that's you're right. There's an interesting metaphor of, and it's got people to tune in. We'll see. So as soon as Harris came out, look, I'm not gonna lie to you. There's plenty of applause, but you could just kind of get that sense of, so we're not getting Beyonce, huh? Right. It was the same way where Oprah came out the night before. And look, Oprah's a mega celebrity and people cheer and they're excited. You can just tell there's so much anticipation. Are we getting a free car? Is she going to do it? Is there something under our seat? No, she's just going to speak and endorse Harris. Okay, that's cool.
So there you go. They way overpromise and way underdeliver. All right, Jim, we talked about the world stage as well, and Kamala Harris talked about that as well, said she'd stand with Ukraine, as you said, a lethal military, strongest in the world. She also talked about the Middle East and tried, of course, to appeal to both sides. The weird part, though, is she actually took the time to really criticize what Hamas did last year, probably the most detailed criticism since the very wake of it in October of last year. But then she pretty much went straight ahead and said that, yeah, these people are evil. They should have their own state.
I will always stand up for Israel's right to defend itself, and I will always ensure Israel has the ability to defend itself, because the people of Israel must never again face the horror that a terrorist organization called Hamas caused on October 7, including unspeakable sexual violence and the massacre of young people at a music festival. At the same time, What has happened in Gaza over the past 10 months is devastating. So many innocent lives lost. Desperate, hungry people fleeing for safety over and over again. The scale of suffering is heartbreaking. President Biden and I are working to end this war such that Israel is secure, the hostages are released, the suffering in Gaza ends, and the Palestinian people can realize their right to dignity, security, freedom, and self-determination.
Kamala Harris also saying she'd be very quick to respond to any aggression from Iran. Was she just on vacation all these times they were attacking our people in the Middle East and killing some of them in Jordan? I mean, again, the contradictions here are amazing. But what struck you most?
I saw several folks, including some colleagues of the Post, who believed that she had worked that, handled the issue masterfully. It struck me as kind of, what you'd expect her to do. And I guess I should say a little bit of credit, a couple molecules of credit for the pro-Israel stance in the opening sentences. Mm-hmm. There are certain Democrats who wouldn't do that. There are certain Democrats who would not go that far. And, Kamala Harris was taking a tiny risk, not a big risk, but this is a convention where every major Jewish Democratic event has two separate emails. One where you confirm that you're coming, and then they tell you the location. They are that freaked out about some sort of disruption or security threat or something like that. So to come out and say, I will make sure Israel always has the arms it needs to defend itself, that's a big, that would pretty clearly takes the arms embargo off the table. And people are saying they heard just, grumbles and problems in the hall. I didn't hear it, but I literally am raising the roof of the United Center up there. So it's conceivable I was not in a spot to hear it. Then she goes off and she says, and also the war in Gaza is bad. Fact check, true. There's been a lot of human suffering there. And goes, we're going to get them to release the hostages. Well, first of all, it's not for lack of trying, right? The CIA director, Burns, has been over there almost certainly every month, if not every week, trying to handle the negotiations, which, by the way, isn't that weird? He's a longtime diplomat, knows the people out there, blah, blah, blah. But this is, the problem is not that, we just haven't tried hard enough. The problem is that Hamas doesn't want to release the hostages. And they've walked away from the table, and they've walked away from every ceasefire deal. And one time they did have a ceasefire deal when they had that prisoner swap earlier, Hamas broke the ceasefire. So the problem is we have bad faith actors. Oh, by the way, there's no indication Hamas has ever been willing to give up their belief that Israel must be destroyed. So we're going to restore. We're going to have a two-state solution. Who's going to run the Gaza Strip? Because right now the only real power out there is Hamas. I would love for there to be some Palestinian Martin Luther King who was reasonable and who could see reason and was willing to recognize Israel's right to exist and could get things something closer to normal. That figure does not exist. And the entire Biden administration the entire modus operandi has been, if we just try hard enough, Hamas is going to see reason. Hamas is going to be rational, reasonable guys. They just want to get some prisoners out. They just want some money. That's not who they are. They are fanatics. They want to destroy every Israeli they can. They want to kill every Jew they can. This is who these guys are. And there's no reasonable deal to be found there. And there's just the entire, huge chunks of the Democratic Party, including Kamala Harris in that speech last night, have operated in just flat out denial of the reality that's been in front of us really since October 7th. Actually, it's been in front of us for decades. But I just don't understand how anybody could look at, October 7th and say, oh, yeah, we can reach a deal with these Hamas guys.
No, it's absolutely insane. So we'll see where the polling is in a few days. We'll see if RFK Jr. drops out and endorses Trump. My guess is if people take it at face value, it's going to help her. If people have been paying attention at all to Kamala Harris since the time she came on the national stage, I think the impact will be marginal. But we'll find out. We'll find out in due time. So, Jim, safe flight home. Talk to you again on Monday.
See you Monday, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us again. Do subscribe to the podcast if you don't already. Tell your friends about us as well. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a great weekend and join us again on Monday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.